I want to talk about the shifts in relationships and emotional wellness behind menopause or associated with menopause. I feel like I don't know if I'm only learning about these things because of what I do for a living or now because of my age, the emotional effects, because I feel like when I was younger and I would hear about menopause, everything you would hear about was the hot flashes, you know? Um, but I don't think people talked enough about how it affects women mentally, emotionally. Um, so many women suffer from depression during menopause, and it's so many different things happening that women don't often have this safe space to talk about. And then at home, we go through so many things as women, period, that people look at in a, oh, well, you just being crazy. You just on your cycle. You know, sometimes as a woman, I don't know how many people in here have experienced that where you have an emotional moment, you're crying, and somebody asks you, are you on your cycle? And it's like, okay, so is that the only time that that I could be emotional? Or, and then you get older and you have a moment and then they're like, oh, you must be going through menopause, and people just kind of, just put that label on it, shove you in a corner, and it's like, come back when you're no longer having hot flashes and being moody, right? But we don't actually talk about the feelings. And even in relationships, there's so many things that change that, you know, that affect you in menopause. And when I say in relationships, that's not only in romantic relationships, but also in your relationships with your friends. You're, like you said, you have less tolerance or less patience. And that has a lot to do with once, even with the estrogen levels lowering, then your happy hormones are lowering as well. Different, it's affecting your hormones altogether. And we have like a lot of hormones. Um, so I've had clients that, aging clients that are actually having issues in relationships. And I had a client one time that was diagnosed with bipolar disorder from a previous practitioner or a previous therapist. And it was really that she was going through menopause, so her hormones were just all over the place. And she ended up having to even look into again, like hormone therapy, which is a thing as well. Because it affects people in so many different ways. So you could be somebody who said, oh, I've never experienced that, but that doesn't mean that the next person won't, right? And so, even in romantic relationships, then it affects your mood, it affects your libido, which people don't often like to talk about, but obviously, so, libido is your basically your sex drive, right? So things will, feel different, even, um, you know, some women experience dryness and they don't want to talk about it. So it just ends up being like, okay, well, let me just stay away from that. So then it affects your sex life in your romantic relationships, which then we all know could shift the relationship altogether, right? There's so many different ways. What I would say is, it's just important to talk about it. Talk about it with your partner, talk about it with your, even if it has to be your grown children, who don't understand because your relationship might shift with them. My mom is here today. Um, and I've noticed even as she got old, so she says she never experienced hot flashes, but I think the less tolerance, the less patience, I think that might be something she experienced, even something that I experienced. I realize that as I get older, I'm like, oh, I don't really have a lot of like tolerance that I had to for everybody else's issues as I did when I was younger. I more so like, learn to leave people where they are, okay? And let people, kind of um, deal with things or problem solve on their own, not really taking on the I have to be the end all be all like I used to. And I think a lot of women experience that because being caretakers, some women are caretakers whether you have children or not from a young age. You help to take care of the household, of siblings, and those types of things. And then you get in relationships, you're taking care of your spouse or your partner. Sometimes that's a task, a task and a half. And then, but being able to talk about those things and relate to other people and knowing that, like, you're not in this situation alone, I think is key. Just being able to communicate, open up and communicate. Find safe spaces, even if it's maybe if you don't have a friend that could relate, maybe you have a group. That's why I said I feel like this environment and this opportunity was just so essential because bringing people together and having community is what helps people to be able to get over things or process things that maybe you're not able to talk about it at home, but then you find another safe space. When it's all said and done, we're only in control of ourselves. So if you're in a relationship and you're going through something and you feel like, okay, maybe I've tried to talk about this at home and it didn't go the way that I thought it would, um, but maybe there's somebody else that you could talk to, like a friend, family member, somebody at church, where you are able to release your feelings and find coping skills to be able to, deal with it on your own because maybe somebody else, like your partner, may not be ready to hear what you're going through or may not have all the answers. Because if you think about it, if we're just learning some of these things, right? Some people in here have maybe been experiencing symptoms of menopause for 20 plus years and you still don't have the answer, right? How is it possible that you would go and then talk to a spouse or a friend and expect them to have the answer or expect them to completely understand, right? That might be a little impossible. But so it's all a learning game and it's all in growth, right? Being educated about these things and also communicating about them openly helps us to grow. But at the same time, we can't expect everybody to grow on the same level. So I just think it's a constant. I read something that said in when you're going through these things, and also, men go through their own thing, right? But when you're going through these things, having the conversation and being particular about the verbiage. So it's less what's wrong with me or what's wrong with you, and how are things changing for us? You know, what do we need to do to accommodate this change for us instead of what's wrong with me or what's wrong with you? Because when we look at ourselves and we have like shame or behind what's going on with us, it's harder to communicate about it. Who in here has experienced symptoms during menopause or perimenopause that has caused them to feel a little embarrassed? Yeah. And even though it's a natural part of life and we know it's natural for all women, that doesn't take away from the embarrassment. That doesn't take away from the feeling of shame. you know? Um, but just being more intentional about how we speak to ourselves in order to shift how we're spoken to in relationships, educating like, hey, this is how I'm feeling right now, but I would prefer you not, dismiss me just because I'm having a hot flash, or I prefer you not dismiss me just because maybe I'm feeling emotional tonight due to the menopause, or maybe some people don't even sleep in the same bed with their spouse because their sleep habits change. I think that people just need to communicate so that you do what's best for you, or do what's best for you, as even as a couple, right? Like, let's talk and let's come to an agreement that will work for the both of us, right? Where we still have intimacy, sexual and non-sexual intimacy. We still are able to communicate, and we both have still healthy sleep patterns. Um, and also just being aware, like, what works for you doesn't mean that it has to work for somebody else, right? Because it seems like to be like a different journey for everybody.